What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Vine and Branches podcast. We hope you're having a great day, and if not, hopefully we can make it a little bit better. Today, our last episode, we finished our John series. And so this episode, me and Gabe prayed about it, and we kind of came together, and now today we're going to be talking about joy and what is joy. Because the world and God define joy differently. And so we're going to be digging into kind of what joy is and how God defines joy. So we're going to hop right into it. I think the first verse we're going to start with is we're going to start in Galatians 5:22, talking about the fruits of the Spirit. And we're going to talk about the fruits of the Spirit because joy is one of the fruits of the Spirit. And we'll just kind of talk about that and go from there. Sound good, Gabe?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Let's go. So Galatians 5:22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. What do you think about that?
I think obviously the fruits of the Spirit is something that we get from God, right? It's not, we can have things of the fruits of the Spirit without God, but it's not lasting. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so we also see in the Bible it talks about growing good fruits and bad fruits, right? And to trim off branches. And so this idea of all these verses of how that grows and our fruits or things we grow out of our life is, although we can have like a good fruit grow, if we're not planting God, we won't see it and it won't last. It'll just fall off, right? So that's also kind of why, like vine and branches, it talks about I am the vine, you are the branches. And so in this verse, I see the fruits of the Spirit is in the idea that we're a tree, and these are things that we grow inside of us, right? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. So I want to ask you a question about it. In your opinion, what's your favorite one, or the one that you connect with the most?
So my favorite one, I kind of go back to 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, where it's saying, abide in all these things, but the greatest of these is love. And so basically going back to this idea of you can have all these great things, you can do all of these amazing things, but if you don't have love, then you're just a clanging gong, or a crashing cymbal is what the Bible says. So to me, God sees love as the most important. And so me trying to follow God's heart, I'm going to say love.
Absolutely.
I think all of them are important and all of them are here, to guide us. I think, okay, so let me talk about it for a second. I find this very interesting because I see the fruits of the Spirit, all of them, when I look at them, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, all of them are choices.
Yeah.
You have a choice in all of them. You have a choice to love. You have a choice to have joy. You have a choice to do all these things. And so what I think is interesting is, one, that they're a choice. And two, it says the fruit of the Spirit is. And so how are you going to have a fruit of the Spirit if you don't have the seed of the Spirit planted in you?
Yeah.
And so in order to amplify these fruits of the Spirit, we have to first be born of the Spirit. We have to have the Holy Spirit living inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then once we do that, then the Holy Spirit by default is going to grow in us and it's going to produce fruit. And these are the fruits that it's going to produce in us. And so I find it interesting that, first of all, it says the fruit of the Spirit, not the fruit of man. If it was the fruit of man, then we wouldn't need Jesus to come down and die for us. But it's the fruit of the Spirit.
Yeah.
And so God knows that as human beings, we're terrible, like people. Like we're ravenous, we're murderers at heart. And so he sends the Holy Spirit to come down. And when we accept it, he gives us these great things, the fruits of the Spirit, to live out and to kind of draw others closer to the kingdom of God. And so I think that's kind of what I got out of it.
Yeah. And when you mentioned Jesus, we notice if we read him and we compare him to Jesus, Jesus had all of them.
Right.
And was the great example of what it means to have the fruits of the Spirit.
There's even a tough one I want to kind of cover later on about joy, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to cover it now or later?
We'll wait a little bit.
Okay, cool. About the fruits of the Spirit, and something I want to talk about, and I've thought about this before, is people that are, like in the Bible, it talks about be slow to be angry.
Right.
Right? So I've noticed, and tell me what you think about this, is in people that are quick to get angry. Sometimes I feel like I don't know how I would put this in a way, but it's quick to easy. I'll relate it back to me. Is sometimes when I'm quick to get angry and I'm quick to like lash out, is the times when I'm not filled with the love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. I don't have the fruits of the Spirit on me. And I'll give you an example. Even recently, is I came home from work one day, and I was cooking in the sun. I was like super sweaty, super hot, sunburnt all over. And so now I don't have peace. Okay, first of all, I don't have joy. Okay. And so I start losing the fruits of the Spirit, and now I'm easily angered, right? And then I'll tell you, the other day I get home from work, and I'm an introvert for the most part. So if I'm upset or I've been around people all day or anything, I don't want to talk to you, right? So then my mom starts asking me these questions, and I clicked, and I was angry and just like, right? And then I was thinking about it later, because me and my mom talked about it. And then I was thinking about it later, and I was like, dude, I was so quick to that because I didn't have joy even in the sweat, hottie, sunburnt moment. I didn't have any of that, any of the fruits of the Spirit in that moment because of all the things that are happening. So I wanted to bounce to James 1:2, and it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." And so I was reading that last night when we started talking about this idea, and I was like, even in the moments when you're like having the hard times, like being sunburnt and talking to people and you're tired of all these things, even in these moments where you don't want certain things to happen, like you don't want to talk to people, you don't want this, you're just easily angered in the moment, you should consider it pure joy when you're facing these trials. And the trials also go to deeper things, like also it says that Jesus said, they hated me first, and as a Christian you will face trials and tribulations and all this stuff. So anyways, that's what I was thinking about when we started looking at this and the fruits of the Spirit, is that me being like, when I don't have joy in trials and stuff, I'm easily angered and easily ticked off. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. I think that just kind of shows you, that James verse just kind of shows you that joy is a choice. It's not like a feeling. It's not like being happy, because obviously you weren't happy, being out in the sun all day and doing all these things. But choosing to have joy is different than feeling happy. Would you agree?
Yes, totally.
And so this was kind of what I was going to get to a second ago, but I see this in Jesus too. We see in Hebrews when he's dying, he's on the cross, and he's enduring all this. Like we just read about it, chapters 20 and 21, and he's enduring all this, these threats being thrown at him, and he's getting whipped and he's getting lashed, and the Bible even says he was disfigured. You couldn't tell he was a human being, and he's up on this cross and he's dying. And then we read in Hebrews that it was the joy that was set before him that kept him there.
Mm-hmm.
Because we learn by reading the Bible that he could have stopped it at any moment. He could have had angels come down and fight for him because he was the Son of God. He could have called angels down and fought for him, but he didn't. Because why? Not because he was having a good time, not because he was happy, but because of the joy that was set before him. And who was the joy? The joy was us. He was so willing, and he would do it 1,000 more times if he would have to come and die for us, because we are the joy. And that's so like crazy for me to think about, first of all, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, sometimes I can't even find joy in my own life. How does Jesus find joy in me?
Yeah.
And so I sit here and I'm like, Jesus, you endure all these things. You're in probably one of the worst predicaments that a human being has ever been in. Yet you're choosing to have joy because of the love that you have for me. And so to me, kind of going back to your little story, it's kind of the same thing. Like in suffering, in these like trials, these places that we don't want to be, we need to have the same kind of joy and love for others that Jesus did on the cross. Because I can guarantee you that Jesus on the cross was not happy to be there. I mean,
No.
like there was no feeling of happiness. It was more of, dang, I don't want to be here. This is anguish, but there's this people that I need to save.
Yeah.
These people that I love, they're in trouble. I need to save them. And so I thought that's kind of what I wanted to get to. But like when I think of joy in its purest form, that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Is Jesus on the cross saying, I'm only here because of the joy that was set before me.
Yeah. That's Hebrews 12:2. It says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. Yeah. That is true joy. So I want to ask a question to you, is to talk about a moment, number one, of joy, of just a time in your life, a memory where there was joy. And then I want you to tell a time in your life when everything was going awful, but you still had joy.
I have to think on that one for a second.
Okay. You can think about it.
Yeah.
Feel free to think about it. But yeah, I was just thinking about that last night. And I was like, there are moments in my life that I remember just pure joy and happiness. And then there's other moments where you remember times were just like awful, but you still had joy,
Yeah.
And then there's other times when I was thinking about it, and it kind of related back to God giving us the joy, is there were times in life where my parents, and it still to this day, sometimes I don't realize it, but life was so, like there were so many problems going on, and my parents just kind of like held the weight of it and didn't because we were kids, they're like,
Right.
oh, you don't need to know. So we didn't know. And so to me, like this part of life was amazing. Like I remember talking about all these things, and then nowadays I'll talk to my parents about it, and like the memories from me to them is very different, because to them it was really stressful, awful, all these things time, right?
Yeah.
But to me it was just full of joy, right? And I think I was thinking about that, and I was like, I had joy because my father was helping me hold the weight. And I think that's also how we have joy with God, the Father, is he helps us hold the weight of the world. And that's what brings us joy. He brings us the joy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes we have all this joy because we don't realize the problems around us, because he's fixing them and holding them for us.
So going back to your question for me, I would kind of agree. I think that a time that I had joy and it was just like pure, just like fun. I think of like all of the, the memories that you have being happy, and like birthday parties and, going swimming and all these things. Like that's just pure joy, having fun.
Oh yeah.
But one of the struggles was actually, so we were going on this, it was, I think it was a couple of years ago, may have been 4 years ago, maybe. We were coming back from our Colorado trip with the church. Basically, it's a trip where we go down there in Colorado and we camp and we experience God on the mountain. And super powerful. But when we were coming home, we had all of these, we had all these problems. I mean, we would have tires blow and we would have things overheat. And I mean, we were stopping every hour getting home. And keep in mind, it's like a 16-hour drive.
Yeah, it's a long drive.
And so we're stopping every 30 minutes to an hour because another problem comes up. Not to mention this is on a Sunday, I'm pretty sure, or it's on a weekend where most of the auto shops aren't open. And so we're sitting here and we really don't know our way around most of these places that we're stopping in. But we're having all these troubles and all these tribulations. And we're just trying to get home. I mean, we're just trying to get home. And we sit here, and about the fourth or fifth stop, Matt Horner comes to us and says, we're going to get through this. This is the devil trying to play with us. And so we decided in that moment not to allow this like trial to affect our joy and affect what happened on the mountain, but instead to make the devil mad by just ignoring it and brushing it off. And it ended up just being like everybody was so over it, but at the same time, everybody was just glad, you know, like there was no like, you know, trying to, you know, fake the joy.
Yeah.
There was just like, we were in a hard time, but there was like hope. There was happiness.
Yeah.
You know? And so I look back at those times and I'm like, man, that's kind of where your fruits of the Spirit show.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy to have joy in the good times, but how much harder is it to have it in the bad times? That's when God tests your faith.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think of Job, who was, I mean, he had everything the world had to offer. He had land, he had cattle, he had all this livestock, he had a wife, he had kids, and all these things, and God takes it away from him. Not necessarily just, I mean, yes, because the devil asked, but because God believed in him, he wanted to test him, you know? And so I look at all of that, and it's like, when God strips everything away, will you still have joy? I had a time in my life recently where I kind of started to idolize some things, and I basically had to do a fast from it. You know, I had to take a fast, and God basically just stripped away everything from my life. And he was like, okay, all you have is me now. What are you going to do? And so I had to get back to this place where all I had was God. And I had to be content with it. And I had to get back to God being my number one. And I had to get back to God being my provider, my protector, all these things. Not these things that are bringing, like the things of the world that I was idolizing. Those things, I had to get away from those things bringing me joy instead of my joy coming from the Lord. And so I just think that when God tries to test you and really see where your heart's at, he's going to strip things away. Would you agree?
I would agree. I would totally agree.
Because I think that's where your faith is built.
Yeah.
I mean, I even think of the disciples on the boat and during the storm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's about as stripped away as you can get. Jesus isn't even on the boat. And they're in the waves. But you read beforehand, and Jesus gives them the promise, you're going to make it to the other side. And they're sitting here on the boat, and they're scared when the waves come. And so I'm sitting here, and I'm sure, you know, we don't get the Jesus' point of view. I wish Jesus wrote a gospel. That would be sick. But we don't get Jesus' point of view. But some of me think sometimes that I like this thought of him walking to the water to them, and he's not necessarily making himself known yet, but he's like on the water. He's like watching them, like trying to see, like, how are they doing? Like, are they passing the test of faith? And then he shows himself to him, and they're like thinking he's a ghost or whatever. Anyways, all this story wraps up, and he's like, "Ye of little faith," like. And so, I just kind of think that's how God tests our faith, is he strips things away, and then when all you have to hold on to is God's hope, then that's where you're going to find your true character and your true heart towards things.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about the fact that one of the things, in my opinion, that kind of sparked the whole podcast idea is you came to me and you're like, dude, we need to do a sermon together. And I was like, okay, sure. So we ended up.
Well, actually, you didn't say, okay, sure.
Well,
at
yeah,
first.
I said, no, no. And you asked me like 10 times. So then I was like, okay, sure. It was on like the 10th time. But, so
it was awesome, by the way.
yeah, it was really good. And we talked about having peace and joy and where, like, kind of where to find it and kind of what, similar to what we're talking about right now. And at the end, we had people be like, dude, y'all bounced really well together. Y'all sound like a podcast. Do you remember that?
I do.
Yeah. So, anyways, I wanted to talk about what we talked about that day on the idea of if one of the points I brought up and something I've kind of try to set in my mind or keep my mindset of, if I know God and I'm completing the purpose of knowing Him and making Him known, and I'm going to heaven, what else matters?
Yeah, right.
So like, if my car breaks down and all these bad things are happening to me, but I'm going to heaven and I'm completing my purpose in life that God gave me, right? What does it matter?
Right.
So in that way, I feel like it's easier for me if I keep this mindset of where my values are and what matters in life. If I set values to things, and kind of like what you're saying, idolizing things, when you set values to things, it can take away from the joy of your purpose. And so if you think about it in the way of, I'm completing my purpose, I'm fulfilling my purpose of knowing God and making Him known, then I can have joy in that, and none of the other things have any value or matter. And so they can't take away my joy.
Right. I don't know if you remember this, but how we kind of got to that topic was we were sitting in my field. We have some land, and we were sitting in the field, and we were just sitting there. I mean, this was for a good 15, 20 minutes, just sitting in a field, not even really talking to each other. We're just sitting there. I mean, just taking in God's beauty and nature and all these things. And we kind of came to the conclusion together. It's like, man, if I didn't do anything for the rest of my life and I just had to sit in this field, I would be content. And so, I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Weren't we trying to feed your cow?
We were trying to get the cow to, yeah. But I just think about that, and I'm like, well, that kind of relates to joy in a sense, because when you're content with what you have, which if we believe that God is all we need, and we're content with having just God, then, man, it's easy to have joy, even when things don't go our way, Yep. I mean, I even think we were sitting in that field, and really all we were thinking about was like Jesus and his beauty and his nature, and like how he's such an artist, and we had just kind of gotten out of a season together where we were just so in awe of how God like works little things together. Mm-hmm. And how he's like in the small things just as much as he's in the big things. And so we're like looking around nature, and we're sitting there, and it's just like, it was so fulfilling,
Yeah.
Like, I would say that's a moment where I had joy,
Yeah.
I was sitting in a field with my best friend doing nothing, but it was like, it was joy.
Yeah.
It was just pure joy. And
something that when you said that made me think of another thing. Isn't that great how things just keep going? Anyways, it made me think of first I want to share a verse actually about contentment. And I like to use this verse because a lot of people like to take verses out of context, Philippians 4:13.
Right.
But in Philippians 12 it says, I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And I can do all of this through him who gives me strength. So really, he's talking about being content, whether he's hungry or well-fed, or whether he has this or doesn't have this. And so, honestly, I think sometimes having the things around you can take away your contentment.
Right.
I think we get so caught up in the things that we forget the bigger picture.
Yeah, in my life, I would like see that as I'm serving God, and then God gives me a blessing, and then I start to like gravitate more towards the blessing than the blesser.
Yeah.
And so, I constantly have to remind myself, like, God, you are my only. You are my first love. And then, yes, you can give me blessings, but I'm still going to keep my eyes on you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I don't pay attention to the blessings, but it's like my full focus is on you. Like, thank you, but you're all I need kind of thing.
Yeah. And I recently bought a Jeep. It was my dream to have this Jeep, right? My dream to have a Jeep. Huge Jeep fan. I'm like running after this goal in life. And I'm thinking in my mind, right? This is going to be awesome. And it'll bring you joy. Well, when I got it, now I ain't saying I haven't loved my Jeep. I love my Jeep. But it's easy to get caught up in the thought of when I complete this, it'll give me joy. But I can honestly have just as much contentment and joy sitting out in that field than I did saving up for years and then buying this Jeep, right? Yeah. Sometimes you don't need to strive to get that big goal to get this big amount of joy. Literally, you can get the same amount of joy sitting in God's presence. In fact, more joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of, when we talk about the things of God, and kind of goes back to what Jesus says, where it's like, I'm the bread of life. When you eat me, like, when you eat of my, what I have to bring, or you drink of my cup, like, you'll be satisfied. You won't thirst or hunger anymore. And I think of that same thing with joy. Like, when we're content with, okay, all we have is God. When we're content with that, like when we're content with all we need is Jesus, all of these like other circumstances really don't bother us. And so we're sitting here content, and then we just have joy. And it's a joy that's not like a Christmas present joy where you have a joy for the day and then it's just like gone after that. Like, I don't know if you've ever been there, but
yeah,
where you're so excited for your Christmas present as a kid, and then you get it finally on the day, and you're playing with it. It's sort of like really cool for the first couple hours, and after that it goes on the shelf and you never see it again.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think of it like Jesus is not that way. Jesus is one to sustain instead of just fill.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to sustain your joy. I think of the verse in, I think, Ecclesiastes 5. Let me pull it up real quick. But I talked about it on the podcast already, I believe. But Ecclesiastes 5:20. For he will not much remember the days of his life, because God keeps him occupied with joy in his heart. And so I see that, and I kind of just think, when we are content, God's going to keep us occupied with joy. It's not necessarily a transaction, but it's a byproduct. Mm-hmm. So when we are content with God, then the fruit of the Spirit is just a byproduct of it. It's not like, be content and then I'll give you this. It's like, be content because I know what you need. When you are content, then this is going to flourish in your life.
Yeah.
And even in Ecclesiastes, like things, it's like, don't disregard the blessings that God's given you, but like steward them. And basically it's saying to enjoy the blessings that he's given you and enjoy life, because life is a blessing. And so it's saying that, and then it drops down to say, for God will keep you occupied in your heart with joy. He won't remember the days of his life. And that was my prayer for a while when I read it, is like, God, keep me occupied with joy in my heart. And I think it was a really powerful prayer. I think it definitely kept me a little bit more humble, a little bit more content. And, I just love the verse because it's really, when we think of joy, it's just like the pinnacle of it, of like, enjoy the blessings, but, at the end of the day, keep your eyes on God, and he's going to keep you content with joy. He's going to keep you occupied with joy in your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of just like my definition of joy. I don't think joy is a feeling, because I looked up the definition before the podcast of what joy is.
Yeah.
And it gave me a really worldly definition. It was like overwhelming feeling of happiness and something along those lines. But I sit here and I'm like, that's not what joy is. Looking at it from a biblical sense. Yes, you can be happy and have joy, but you can also not be happy and still have joy.
Yeah.
As we see it with Jesus on the cross. But, yeah.
Because excitement and happiness is fleeting.
Yeah.
So.
For sure.
And I have a story. It's kind of a funny story about how a spike in excitement and happiness can drop so quickly and then cause problems. So I think you've heard this story, but I have been calling. This was like 3 years ago or something. I've been calling vet's office. Hey, can I come shadow? Yeah, sure. Blah, blah, blah. And then I go to give them information, and they're like, oh, you're not 18? Sorry, we can't have you shadow. You have to be 18. So I could not find a spot to go shadow. And then finally, I find a place that would let me come shadow the vet. And so I'm so excited. I'm so pumped to get to do this. And I go in this morning, and my excitement and happiness that is fleeting is at a high right now, right? I'm so pumped, so excited. Well, we suppose, because I have seen a ton of blood. Shot animals, I'm a hunter, right? Blood's never been a problem for me. Never. So we suppose it's because my happiness and excitement like dropped after I was there. But it dropped. I'm watching him do this surgery. I've been having no problems all day. But he cuts the dew claws. Do you know what a dew claw is?
Yeah.
It's like their little thumb at the top of their leg. He cuts them off of this. It was a beagle. He cuts them off, and blood starts like almost squirting out of the hole. Okay? Okay, no problems, right? There was a problem, okay? So I start to feel like sweaty, like covered in sweat all over, everywhere. And I'm like, I don't feel very good. My stomach starts to hurt. Start to feel like I'm going to throw up. And then, I'm not even kidding. My vision just, I can't see anything. I don't remember anything. Nothing. And all of a sudden then, my vision starts to come back, right? He's cleaning up from his surgery, so it's been a couple minutes. And I'm standing here, and my vision like comes back, and I turn around and I see a seat, and I walk over and I sit down. And I'm like, dude, I basically just passed out standing and was still standing when I came back to. I got in the car after the day. My mom picked me up. I had to be 15 because I couldn't drive because my mom picked me up.
Golly.
And my mom's like, how'd it go? And I go, I don't know if I can do this. I don't think I can be a vet. Well, I've gone back since then. Blood is not a problem So I don't know what it was that day. We guess it was because I was so excited, and the fleetingness of all the excitement dropped. Your dopamine drops, and then all of a sudden, you have all these problems, right? So, anyways, yeah, I passed out and standing up. Have you heard that story?
I don't know.
Oh,
If I have heard it, I don't remember it. But
yeah,
that's a good story.
that was
That's kind of funny.
one for the books for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, but joy is something that doesn't flee when times are tough or when you achieve a goal. And because I've also had times when I achieve a goal and then all my happiness and stuff drops, like after I achieve it, because then you realize, oh, it's not what it's not what I thought it would be. So then it creates this feeling inside of, wow, where's that happiness I was striving for? So then you really drop. Does that make sense? You ever had that happen?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I bought Pongo, I was so excited, saving up and searching everywhere for this dog. My brother flew to Boston to get this dog and ships it back, brings it back. And the first night I have it, I just spent all this money. He just flew all this way, all these things. I've been waiting for so long. And this dog was full out like yelping and whining and screaming all night. Had diarrhea all in his kennel everywhere. Partly because she drugged him for the plane. I guarantee you, the lady drugged him. Anyways. And the next day, I was so like, I'm so excited for this dog, and this dog sucks. And my parents love telling this story. I went to him, and I was crying. I go, give him back. Give me my money back and take the dog. I don't want him anymore. I'm done. So glad I kept him, but like my drop in all my excitement and happiness, it was gone. I hated that dog.
Actually, take it back.
I hated the dog right then. So
that's funny.
yeah.
No, we love Pongo.
Dude, he's a great dog.
He's fat, but
the best dog I've ever met. So
this is a little bit off topic, but I've got something.
Okay.
I know you've heard the song Hard Fought Hallelujah by Brandon Lake. Shout out Brandon Lake. Should come on the podcast sometime, maybe. But anyways, I was reading this verse when we were preparing in Proverbs 17 in verse 22. And it says, a joyful heart is good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. And I don't know why, but that verse reminded me of that song. And it was almost, I think the reasoning for it was, you see Brandon Lake and now Jelly Roll.
Dude, that was crazy when I saw that.
Yeah, I know. I didn't know how that would work, but it worked.
It worked.
Yeah. Anyways, Brandon Lake and Jelly Roll are going around, and they're not even doing this song at all Christian venues either. They're going around and they're doing it at these secular venues. And you can see, if you watch like the footage of it, when they're singing this song, it's almost like a medicine to these people. I mean, you see people crying that have never heard the song before. And it's like, bro, that song was so God inspired. I mean, and I just see it as like a cry for all of these people hearing it. It's like all of them are saying the same thing, you know. And I think of this song, and it's giving them hope. And then that hope kind of turns into joy because they see a hope, you know.
Yeah, and I saw a clip, actually, where Jelly Roll was singing the song. I don't know if you saw this. He's singing the song at this giant concert, and there's a double rainbow in the sky.
Yeah, you showed me that.
And he's like, you can't tell me God ain't real. it was like it has to be, you know?
Yeah.
It's so powerful. And dude, I love the song before Jelly Roll got on it.
Yeah, me too.
And then after Jelly Roll was like, dude, that spoke to me. And then they did the song together and everything. It just makes it even better. Like, it puts a story behind it.
Yeah, and it's almost like, to me, I mean, Jelly Roll before this was not very Christian, I would say. Like, you wouldn't necessarily call him a Christian, but then he comes on this song, and now he's like striving for God. Like, you can see the change in his heart. And so it's almost like, who else could write that but God? Because there's no way that there's just this one song that Jelly Roll just hears, and then he turns his whole like heart. It just speaks to him. Got to be the Spirit of God speaking to him and turning his heart. And you see this, and I think of it from like a person who doesn't know Christ perspective. He's going to this concert to hear all these other artists, and Jelly Roll, who you know is secular, gets up on the stage and starts singing, "I'll bring my hard fought hallelujah." You know, like, I've been through crap, but like, God, you have my yes, you have my. And I look at that and I'm like, bro, that's so encouraging for like somebody who's like from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
It's so encouraging because it's like you can go and there's like plenty of places where you can see Jelly Roll's like testimony and all these things. And it's like, dude went through some crap. But like, from the outside looking in, it's like, okay, this dude, if he can, you know, restore his life, then like what else can I do? You know?
Mm-hmm.
It's so encouraging. And it just like, you know, one of the topics that Gabe came up with when we talked about doing another podcast was the power of testimony. I see this as the same thing. Like, Jelly Roll's testimony, it breeds a hope, and it breeds just this it can be done kind of thing in people.
Yeah. Do you know who Connor Price is?
I do.
Okay. Have you heard a couple songs by him?
Yeah, a couple of them. Yeah.
Okay. So I had some buddies that like to listen to him. Knew who he was. Not bad, you know? Regular rapper. And then one day, so he drops a song with Forrest Frank, Up, which everybody knows. Okay. It's a huge song. And I was like, dude, he did one with Forrest Frank? Like, that's crazy. Didn't expect that. And then I want to say it was like a month. I don't know how long later. But I'm going to listen to music, and on the newest release, it says Connor Price and Maverick City Music. Have you listened to that song?
I've listened to a little bit of it, but not. Like,
so it's called I Need Help. And dude, another like secular artist that's going and doing collaborations with Christian artists and going, oh, I'm searching for this thing, right? And I'm striving to find what this is all about, what this joy is coming from. So that song's, dude, spectacular, honestly. He talks about like that he received this Bible and he put it on his nightstand, collects dust, and he never read it. And he was like, I'm sitting here searching for hope, and I realized I had it all along right next to my bed. And then he was like, I opened it up and I read it with my son. He says, in hopes that one day he doesn't feel shame when he says, I need help. Like, talking about needing help from God. And dude, the song's spectacular. And you go, even these secular artists like Jelly Roll who have these fans, they start to realize, wait a minute, there's more to this life. And then these other fans come in and they're here to listen to this artist that they hear all these other songs, and then they play this, and it does. It's like it speaks something to them, right?
Yeah.
So I think, and the reason why I think so many people are striving for it is because in this world, people start to realize all these things, all this money they have, all the fame they have, all this stuff, it's not bringing them joy. And so then they start to strive to find what is true joy? What is joy? Where do I find this true joy?
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually they find Jesus and they start to go, oh, this is it. And they start to run after it.
Yeah, I think they kind of, what I've seen in Jelly Roll is this dude who one song spoke something to him. He kind of like digs a little deeper, and now he's like, okay, I've been looking for this my whole life. Like, I'm broken. Like, he realizes he's broken. That's the first step, by the way. I mean, God can't work with your pride. But Jelly Roll realizes he's broken, and he's like, this is what I've been looking for my entire life. And he finds almost like, you can see it, he finds almost like a purpose in it. Of like bringing others to Christ and bringing others. And I think it's so powerful because what you said about like the world can't, sustain you like Jesus can. It's kind of like what we talked about earlier, how like these things can fill you up, but they won't sustain you. They're finding this thing where they're finding Jesus who doesn't just sustain you for, a day or a month or a year, but he's going to sustain you for a lifetime, even when the fame goes away, even when the money passes. It's like this thing that they've been looking for so long, they finally found it. And you can see the just change in heart and the change in tone and all these things. And to me, I look at it and it's so powerful. And it's like, that is just an encouragement for me to share my faith. Because I know that there's people even in Stephenville, Texas, that need Jesus. Even people in Stephenville, Texas that know about Jesus but still don't have a relationship with him. And so I've got to be the light of the earth. I've got to be the salt of the earth. And kind of what helps me to get attention for Jesus, other people looking at me, is my joy. People look at how you react to things, is what I've learned.
Yeah.
People will look at you in the good times and see, oh, he has joy. That's normal. Then they'll look at you in the bad times and they'll sit there and they'll go, okay, how's he reacting this time? Like, and they might not be doing it like on purpose, but subconsciously they're like, oh, this dude has joy even though all these terrible things are going on. Like, what gives? And so I've realized that, and that's just even more encouragement for me to go share the gospel, I think.
Yeah. And have you ever thought about the verse where it talks about lukewarm Christians and it's better to be hot or cold?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, that made zero sense. Zero. I would, in my mind, I'd go, wait, it's worse to go to church and call yourself a Christian but not really be a Christian, be lukewarm, than to just go out and be awful and do all these horrible things. It's worse. Like, I don't understand that, right? And nowadays I look at it and it's exactly how you're just describing it, of people watch what you're doing. And the difference is when you're lukewarm, when you're just flat out bad, you're giving yourself a bad name. But when you're lukewarm, you're not just giving yourself a bad name, but you're representing Jesus and God, and so you're giving him a bad name. And I started to realize that was the reason why, is that when you call yourself a Christian and then you go out and you don't live that way, and when bad times happen, you don't have joy and all these things, right? And in some ways, this is why I've talked about cussing and, things like that. And in my opinion, this is why one of multiple reasons I don't do it, is that if I go out and I say, yeah, I'm a Christian, and then I say these words or I don't have joy in the hard times, people subconsciously look at me and they go, well, he says he's a Christian, but he's no different than me. So, like, really, there's nothing in this. There's no value in it. He's no different. And so then they immediately connect the problems in me to Christianity, and then I'm giving God a bad name. And that's why I think when he talks about lukewarm Christians, that's what he means. Is you're not just giving yourself a bad name, you're giving me a bad name too. And you're leading people away from me because they connect what you're doing back to me and then think, oh, well, he's no different.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. Like lukewarmness. And I agree with God. Like that's a hard place to be. Like you're either for me or you're against me. There's even a verse in the Bible, I'm not completely sure where it is, but it says something around the lines of like, if you're not like God says, if you're not my friend, you're my enemy, which means like enemy. It's like you're either for me or you're against me. You're not on the fence. Like, and I don't know where I heard this, but it may have been from you. I don't know if it was a song or something, but it was basically like talking about this guy who was like he was portraying this picture of a guy sitting on the fence, and one side is God and one side is the devil. And he's getting through life just sitting on the fence, like one foot in, one foot in the other one. And so he's getting through life sitting on the fence, and then he eventually dies, and he thinks he's like beat the system. Like he thinks, oh, like I'm going to go to heaven because I, had 1 foot in for God and then 1 foot in for the devil. And then the devil basically says, or he gets up on judgment day, first of all. He gets up on judgment day and God says, depart from me. And then he goes down to hell and the devil asks him, or he asks the devil, he goes, why am I in hell if I had 1 foot on God's side? Like what? I was on the fence. I wasn't even on your side. He said, but I own the fence. So when you look at it from that perspective, it's like, bro, like you got to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
Because the fence is not an option.
Yeah.
I don't know if I heard that from you or from somebody else, but
yeah, that's a really good point. I don't think I told you that.
But I just
heard
like
things like it, but
I think about that and I'm like, bro, how true is that though?
Yeah.
The devil like sits there and plays with you, but like in the back of his mind, he knows he owns the fence.
Yep.
Like he can sit there and like, and this is why I hate the devil so much. He tries to get you to the place where he gets you okay with being on the fence.
Yeah.
Because he knows he owns it. And so it's just like that breaks my heart for people that are deceived into thinking that having 1 foot in and 1 foot out is like an okay like thing that'll sanctify you.
It'll play out. Yeah.
It breaks my heart. But yeah, what were you saying about lukewarm Christians? When you were saying how people look at them and then they're portraying a bad name onto Christ. I thought of this verse in 2 Timothy 3, verse 5. And it's talking about godliness in the last days. And verse 5 says, having the appearance of godliness, but denying its power. And then it says, avoid such people. And to me, that kind of just describes a lukewarm Christian. Having the appearance of godliness, having the appearance of, oh, Christ is in me, but denying its power. Denying its power to change your life, denying its power to, change you. Because ultimately, it's your choice.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, when you said that, that's kind of the verse I thought of.
Yeah. Dude, I like that story you just told about the devil and stuff.
I don't know where I heard that. I'm going to have to find it again.
Have you read Screw Tape Letters yet?
I have not. I have the book, but I haven't read it yet.
Oh, dude, that is a good book.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm going to read it soon. I haven't quite finished Mere Christianity, but I'm almost done. I kind of took a long break. Like, I did pretty good for a while. Like, I would read it every day a little bit, but then it's been like a month or two, and I haven't picked it up again. So
I will say, I think it's the last chapter of that book. He says something that's a little, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I agree with that, but all of his other stuff, I'm telling you, like the Screw Tape Letters, is spectacular, and it gives you such a good image of it. I think my favorite thing, and I think I've told this on the podcast, at least I've told it to you. My favorite thing he says in that book is, so there's Screw Tape and then Wormwood is the nephew. And so Wormwood is trying to deceive a human into falling. And the whole book is chapters of them writing letters to each other. And so Screw Tape's like, oh, you need to do this to make him fall. And then Wormwood's like, well, he's doing this. And Screw Tape's like, well, then do this, you know. And so Wormwood goes, yeah, well, he's getting humble, and he's finding, because the human is a Christian, but he's getting humble and he's doing this. And Screw Tape goes, well, just make him aware that he's getting humble. And it's such an interesting perspective, because if you think about it, when you get humble, all the enemy has to do is go, think about it, you're being humble. And then in your mind you go, wow, I am being humble. And then you've instantly lost your humbleness.
yeah, back into pride.
And it's like, whoa.
Yeah, super deep.
Yeah, super. Dude.
So I think of that and I'm like I need the Lord to help me. Like, I need him to sustain me.
Yeah.
You know? Like, that's really the only word I can find for it. Is like, because knowing that I'm a human being, I'm going to have pride. Like, I'm just naturally going to want to do the things of the world and the things of my flesh. But, you know, that idea of, like, even in your humbleness, you can be prideful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, it just kind of hits a different spot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's by far probably my favorite part of the book.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good parts, though, dude. There's a lot of good parts.
Yeah, I'm going to check it out pretty soon, hopefully. So,
Man, anything else on joy?
I don't think so. Just joy is definitely a choice. And when we choose to have joy, it kind of comes from being content with God and only having him.
Yeah.
So when we're content, then we'll have joy. And then when we have joy, we pour it on to others. So.
Oh, yeah.
And it all goes back to God's heart. Love God, love people.
To love God or to know God and make him known is our CC motto.
Yeah.
So having that purpose definitely, in my opinion, brings you the joy of fulfilling that purpose.
For sure.
So.
Well, guess we're going to wrap up here. Hope you've had a good time listening. Hopefully you learned a little bit. Not sure what we'll do next podcast, but you'll know eventually. And if you have any ideas, drop it in the comments. We'll look at it and see if it's something that we feel like we need to talk about. We love you guys, and thank you for listening.